Hello, Girlboss Radio listeners. We have a great guest coming up today. Journalist, author, LinkedIn influencer Emily Chang is here to talk about her new book, Brotopia. Yep, it's just what it sounds like, Brotopia, and how to break up the boys club of Silicon Valley. But first, I want to talk about my favorite pajamas called Lunya, Lunya. I have been living in my Lunya pajamas. This isn't even an ad. I wrote them on Instagram just effusively telling them oh my gosh, if I could just wear this all the time, I would. So they have these really cute sleep sets, and then they have some kind of jerseys. But the thing I really love is their washable silk, because I never buy silk pajamas. I mean, what lady doesn't get a little bit of grease on her? You have to be able to wash your jammies, and I'm not going to take my silk to the dry cleaner. I'm sleeping in it. I'm not that fancy. So it's just it's really nice, breathable silk, keeps you from sleeping in acrylic, and they're sexy enough. It's not wearing a giant stretched out see-through Garfield shirt that goes down to your knees. But it's also not over the top frills or anything like that. It's just really beautiful, simple sleepwear.
Awesome.
To wash them, you just use cold water and lay them flat to dry, which is what? How? Nothing. Washing nothing is that easy.
Nope.
And their washable silk is also thermoregulating. If you don't know what that means, it means it keeps you warm when you're cool and cools you down when you're warm.
So find out why Sophia and the Fast Company are raving about Lunya and get 15% off your first purchase when you go to lunya.co and enter promo code GIRLBOSS. That's LUNYA.co. Enter promo code GIRLBOSS for 15% off your first purchase.
Lunya, sleepwear for the modern woman. Also, every woman who's attending the Girlboss rally at the end of this week is getting a gift card from Lunya. So you better come to our next Girlboss rally, because we're all going to sleep together. Success. It's such a complicated idea, and yet for so long we've all collectively subscribed to a single definition of the word, which was likely given to us by a white-haired dude somewhere in a boardroom in the 1960s. And there's nothing wrong with that definition, with the notion of climbing a corporate ladder with a singular focus. But it's time to make space for a few other definitions, for side hustles and well-being and failing forward, and for the idea that success is a wild ride, not the destination at the end of it. Join me for a journey into the lives of women who are redefining success and paving the way for others with grit and grace. I'm Sophia Amoruso, the founder and CEO of Girlboss Media, and this is Girlboss Radio. Emily Chang is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, tech guru, LinkedIn influencer, and author. As a journalist, she's worked for some of the most prestigious news institutions, including CNN and Bloomberg TV. She interviewed me once on stage at the Vanity Fair conference. During her time at CNN, Emily was stationed in Beijing, China, and reported on prominent stories, including China's economic transformation and its environmental consequences, North Korea's nuclear ambitions, and President Obama's historic visit to Asia. After she left CNN, she joined Bloomberg TV. On Bloomberg, she started a daily show featuring original reporting and interviews with tech newsmakers, including venture capitalists, CEOs, startup entrepreneurs, and analysts.
What's cool about this job is you and I, we're always interviewing new people every day, and it's like an everyday education.
Emily has interviewed some of tech's biggest names, including Twitter co-founder Ev Williams, LinkedIn co-founder and executive chairman Reid Hoffman, Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and so many more.
I was actually in Washington, D.C., inside the Zuckerberg hearing, and it was fascinating.
Now she's here to talk about her new book, which I love, Brotopia, Breaking Up the Boys Club of Silicon Valley.
Obviously, people need to look harder. They need to try harder. And I fully believe that the people who are changing the world can do that. they can hire women and pay them fairly and fund their ideas.
Emily will share where women in tech stand today and how we can increase our position by ending many of the inherently sexist practices that currently exist in the Valley. We'll get to our chat with Emily in just a moment, but first, Maggie and I are going to chat about what's going on in the Girlboss offices this week. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on.
Woo.
What's up, Maggie?
All right, just a couple of Girlboss gals.
Well, we relaunched the website last week. If you didn't see it, go to girlboss.com. It is so pretty.
It is sexy.
And the Girlboss rallies in just 3 days.
Oh my God, I can't even believe it.
Are we ready?
I think we are. I mean, we're in good shape.
We are, but we are relaunching a website and hosting a conference for 750 women at the same time is like
a lot of coffee.
Whoa. Yeah, lots of coffee and pizza and pastries.
Oh God.
So what's going on? We have a piece on overcoming getting started.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept. I mean, a lot of us, are insecure about certain things, have thoughts driven by fear that cause us to just never end up doing something about an idea we have or a really creative solution we want to invent. We just kind of hold it inside and just keep it there.
And so it's Mel Robbins, right? Who gives this advice. What's the advice?
Yeah, if you don't know who Mel Robbins is, she's an amazing career coach. She is actually the author of this piece, and she encourages us to get on board of this 5-second rule. When I first read that, I thought she was talking about, like dropping food on the floor, picking it up and eating. It's not that one, but I'm okay with that one too. But this one is actually anytime you have an idea that seems like a sure thing or that you're really, really passionate about, act to advance it within 5 seconds. So, acting quickly, doing something now rather than keeping it to yourself and thinking it over until it dies inside your head because of the fear.
For too long. Yeah, I think that's really important. So many people have such great ideas and feel really strongly about them, but don't know where to start and where you start where you start. Like you start by doing something. You start by doing the first thing that you think you might need to do, or you look to the end and start taking the actions that you think are going to get you to the end. But I also believe that sometimes we just need to sit on things before we, just let them stew a little bit. So I believe in this, but I also believe in just a little bit of waste in the creative process is probably necessary for those ideas to really fully bake. So I think both work. But at the end of the day, no matter how fast or slow you are, you have to be taking action in your life if you want anything to happen.
Or even writing it down so it feels more real than just something you've conjured up in your head.
Yeah, and the more chances you give yourself to meet that person or start that business or say yes to something, the more things are going to start happening in your life. And I think a lot of people don't go out and just let those moments of chaos happen that will lead them to these things that they don't even know are coming or don't know how these people are going to help them. So say yes.
Yeah, my mom always used to say, shoulda, woulda, coulda, as if, don't leave any regrets in the past or behind. And I always carried that with me. Because whenever I'm scared or intimidated, I'm just like, who cares if I don't want to look back and think shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few things that are too great to lose. So in a lot of ways, it's like, really, what do you have to lose? It's like, what, you're going to be embarrassed? Like, if you're not willing to be embarrassed, like, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve to have what you want.
We're going to come up with so many ideas. I mean, one of those is bound to be that $1 million baby, and I would hate for, if it was me, I'd hate for that one idea just not to get built out because I was scared.
Someone will do it before you.
Exactly.
The ideas, no, none of our ideas are really that unique, myself included. You just have to be the person that does something about it.
It's true. It's really true.
Well, thank you, Maggie. And again, go to girlboss.com if you want to see the most beautiful website that you've ever seen and that our team worked so hard on. And we worked with a team called Wonder Sauce out of New York. They also have an office here in LA, and they did a really great job on the site with us. Now get ready to hear from journalist and author Emily Chang. You grew up in Hawaii.
I did.
What was that like? At what point did you get off the island?
It was awesome. So I was born and raised. So I left when I was 18. I went to college on the East Coast. I had no idea how to dress for the winter. I didn't understand the concept of layering. And I thought if I just wore a J. Crew pea coat, I'd be good. But I was still freezing, and I would run between classes in my flip-flops. But Hawaii was amazing. I mean, I grew up on the beach. I was chasing the sun all the time.
Oh, my God.
And
do you surf?
I have surfed. I am not very good.
I'm not either.
And I'm kind of scared. So surfing is not my thing. I prefer to sunbathe.
If I'm going to fall on something, I want to be able to see it before I fall on it. Like, I don't need coral coming out of, like, the ether.
Right.
And, like,
the rocks, the surfboard potentially hitting you in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, other surfers running into you. It's not as idyllic as it sounds.
So your dad was born in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm. So my dad was born in Taiwan, and his mom was actually from Hawaii. So they moved back to Hawaii when he was 5 years old. And my mom is Italian and born in Philadelphia. And they met Georgetown and ended up moving back to Hawaii and never left.
Wow. How do you feel like being a first-generation American has shaped your career?
Well, I don't feel quite like a first-generation American because my dad's mom was born in the United States, but he did grow up speaking Mandarin and then lost it when he moved at 5 years old because it was not cool to not know English. And so he sort of repressed it. And, back then,
there's a lot of
they
people
weren't
in
focused
Hawaii
on
who kind of don't know English, though. Right? Is that mean?
No. Hawaii is a state. Some people forget that. And, back then it wasn't cool to know a second language. You had to learn English. Growing up in Hawaii is definitely different than growing up on the mainland, as we call it. But I think there was always something special about it. And, some people don't understand it, and it's fun to explain. But, we had school. I went to the same school that President Obama went to.
Wow.
Which was pretty awesome. And, great people, wonderful quality of life,
What
great
island
education.
were you on?
I lived on Oahu and was born and raised in a town called Kailua, which is one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And I went to a school called Punahou School. My mom was a teacher there. It was very idyllic.
Sounds idyllic. That was the word I was going to use. So you went to Harvard. I mean, I know you said you went to college on the East Coast, but you went to Harvard. How has that changed the life of your career? They say Harvard is the most, social of the Ivy League schools. Right?
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I do think that the best thing I got out of Harvard was the amazing friends that I made and the community that I have. And, I'm super close to my girlfriends from college, even though we all live in different cities. And what was interesting about Harvard is even though it is one of the best schools in the country, it didn't have what I wanted to do. It didn't have a journalism program, and there was no sort of concrete path. If you want to be a TV journalist, what can you do? And so I really had to carve my own path. And so I got an internship at the news station in Honolulu my freshman year of college. And every summer it was a different internship. So Good Morning America in New York, the local station in San Francisco. And then I was a writer at the station in Boston my senior year of college. And I started right after 9/11. So there was a lot of work to do. And I just fell in love with telling stories and presenting stories and, found a way to make my own way. I did apply to master's in journalism programs after college, but I ended up getting a job at NBC. So I decided not to go back to school.
That's not bad.
Which was, yes, that was a good decision. It was a good decision.
So did you always want to be in reporting? At what point were you like, I'm really good at talking and learning things and telling stories?
I started out as a pre-med, and in my chemistry class, I realized I wasn't having a lot of fun talking to people, and I really enjoyed talking to people and having conversations with the amazing people who were going to Harvard. And so I switched to a liberal arts degree, and in the summer I needed a job, and I thought, well, what do I like to do? I like to sing. I was in a cappella, don't tell anyone. I, do love to perform, but I also love writing and telling stories. And I thought, well, TV journalism seems like it could be a good option. Let me try it. And I absolutely loved it. I would do an 8-hour so you work for free generally when you're doing a news internship. And I would work for 8 hours shadowing reporters. And then I would work another 8 hours doing my own stories and my own resume tape and putting something together that I could show someone who I hoped would say, okay, you have potential.
At what point did it become easy for you? Because, I mean, even on this podcast, we edit the podcast. Like, I gave a talk at a Village Global event yesterday up in Menlo Park. And, I mean, I had note cards, and it was a 10-minute talk. And I practiced for my, 10-minute talk with my note cards.
That's hard. Talking for 10 straight minutes by yourself, that's hard. I would have to practice that, too.
But, your brain has to connect really quickly to your mouth to, interview somebody. And, oh, you're interviewing Dick Costello. He talks really fast. And, he's saying interesting things. And you have to drive that conversation. You have to move it in a direction that you want to. Sometimes people will try to move it in a different direction if you're interviewing them. I mean, that takes so much practice. What were you like in the beginning?
So I would write down literally all my questions, and I would stare at my script, and I would look back up, and I wouldn't listen to the answer, and I realized that was not a very good idea. And when it got easier for me is when I learned to listen, because it is hard to sort of go where the conversation is going and follow up without, losing track of where you're going to go next.
Or acknowledging what the person just said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I found that when I was almost a little less prepared, I actually did a better job because I was listening.
You're just having
more.
a conversation.
That's not to say I don't still get nervous. I interviewed Sheryl Sandberg a couple of weeks ago. They're in the middle of this huge Facebook crisis, and I had important questions to ask, and I was also a little nervous. When I sit down with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, that makes me nervous, which I think is what's cool about this job is, you and I, we're always interviewing new people every day, and it's like an everyday education.
Emily has interviewed the largest leaders in the tech space, from Mark Zuckerberg to Sheryl Sandberg to Twitter's co-founder and Twitter's CEO, Dick Costello. I asked Emily what the most interesting interview she's ever done was, because so many of these people are just so scripted, and sometimes something really interesting comes out.
I have really loved, I do a daily show, which is, shorter interviews. And then I do a long form show called Bloomberg Studio 1.0, where I get to sit for an hour with someone. And that's where I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing how they got to where they are. And I've just had the opportunity to interview some incredible people, whether it is Mark Zuckerberg and Melinda Gates. My mom actually came with me to that interview, and as she was on her way out, she offered to take a picture with my mom, and I think my mom, could have died right then, and a happy woman. And so, I just love, being able to talk to people who are on the front lines of doing some incredible things and changing the world. It's a really fun job.
Do you find that some of these people, because I went to Code Media and they interviewed Susan Wojcicki and the people who are in charge of the news feed at Facebook. And I mean, they still make headlines because they might say a sentence they've already said slightly differently. But these people are so buttoned up. Do you ever get things that are like, whoa, I can't believe I got that out of them?
Yes. So it's been interesting being on the other side of the table now and being interviewed about my book, which has also been terrifying and a learning experience, but now I'm kind of used to it and it's become really fun. I was interviewing, and this is actually in chapter 5 of my book, a venture capitalist, very powerful venture capitalist who had no female partners in the U.S. part of his firm at the time. And I said, I've really made it sort of my mission to ask about this over the last few years. What are you doing to hire women? What are you doing to promote women? What are you doing to fund women? And I said to him, you have no women partners. What are you doing about that? And he said, oh, we look very hard. I believe we're completely gender blind, race blind, blind to religion and sexuality.
Oh, no.
But what we're not prepared to do is to lower our standards. And when he said that, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Who is this? Because it's public.
It's public. It's Mike Moritz, who's the chair of Sequoia Capital.
Oh, wow.
Legendary investor.
The crustiest of the crusty on Sand Hill Road, though.
He invested in Google. He has made a lot of money. He, you're an entrepreneur.
They have Jess Lee now. Everything's...
Jess Lee is, as far as I know, fantastic.
She is.
But a lot of entrepreneurs would die to get a check from Sequoia. And so when he said that, I expected a politically correct answer, and that was not the politically correct answer.
How long ago was that?
That was at the end of November, the end of 2015, November, and actually it's what lit the spark that led me to write the book.
Emily's new book, Brotopia, explores the inherent sexism in Silicon Valley and how to break up the boys' club of the tech industry. I asked her what compelled her to write the book and what she hopes the reader gets out of it.
I've always cared about this issue, but, in the earlier days when I was building my show, it was kind of not polite to ask these questions for some reason. And as I became more courageous about asking these questions, I realized, there's so much more to why, right? And when Mike Moore had said that to me, I felt like for the first time someone had actually told me the truth, and it revealed part of the problem, right? People think they have to lower their standards to hire women, which is ridiculous. And everywhere I went, people wanted to talk about what he had said. And they were mostly horrified. Some people didn't see a problem with it, shockingly.
It made headlines, right?
It made headlines. Vanity Fair had a headline, something like, "Here's news to all you smart tech women out there. Apparently you don't exist." So, obviously people need to look harder. They need to try harder. And I fully believe that the people who are changing the world can do that. They can hire women and pay them fairly and fund their ideas. And I never thought I could write a book. I had some really great role models around me, some colleagues who are also authors. I saw people like you, and I thought maybe I can do this.
Of course you can.
And it's been honestly the biggest challenge of my entire career, but also the most rewarding, and I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah. There's a bit in your book about like the beginning of tech and why how things have evolved into the existing brotopia. Because it didn't start with bros, right? It started with women, and there was some reason like they wanted like Asperger's-y guys who could just like sit in a chair all day. Like, tell me that story.
This was like the smoking gun. So, a lot of the sort of modern day Silicon Valley I know because I've been covering it for the last 8 years. The history was so surprising to me. First of all, women played huge role in the computing industry in the early days. They were programming computers for the military and programming computers for NASA. It was literally like Hidden Figures, but industry-wide. And then as the tech industry was exploding in the 60s and 70s, and they were desperate for new talent, they started doing these personality tests and aptitude tests to look for good programmers. And they decided that good programmers, quote, don't like people. Well, if you look for people who don't like people, the research tells us you'll hire far more men than women.
And me. I'm just kidding.
And there's no evidence that people who don't like people are better at this job than people who do, or that men are better at this job than women. But it perpetuated this stereotype of the antisocial, mostly white male nerd that exists to this day.
Yeah.
And companies as big
Poorly
as IBM.
Dressed.
You
No.
can fill in the blanks.
That's all me.
You can fill in the blanks. But look, people think pop culture created this stereotype. It did not. The tech industry created this stereotype, and it shuts out more than half the population. In 1984, women were earning 37% of computer science degrees. That has plummeted. It's been at 18% for the last decade. Women had, 30-something% of jobs in the 80s. Now they're at, close to 20%.
In technology specifically?
In across the tech industry.
Wow.
I mean, that's devastating because I think about how different the world might be if women had a seat at the table in the beginning, if, investors weren't only looking for people who looked like Mark Zuckerberg or looked like Bill Gates when they were funding new ideas. I think about all the women who didn't get the opportunity to start the next Facebook or the next Google or the next Apple.
It's no secret that women get harassed 1,000 bazillion, you don't need the metric, times more online than most men. So I wonder, what sort of backlash has Emily endured, and why does that happen? How do we build these things that don't accommodate women and allow things like this to happen?
I interviewed Ev Williams, the co-founder of Twitter.
Who I love.
I do really like Ev, and he was really honest with me about this. He said, I think if we had had women on the early Twitter team, that maybe online harassment and trolling wouldn't be such a problem. We weren't thinking about that when we were building this. We were thinking, what are all the wonderful and amazing things that can be done with Twitter? Not how can it be used to send death threats or how can it be used to send rape threats? And perhaps if they had more women on the team who might be more attuned to, first of all, women get the most extreme forms of online harassment, maybe the product would have been designed differently. And, we think that that online hate exists because people are just mean. Well, in fact, the very way these systems are designed can encourage that kind of behavior. And there's, lots of evidence to show that if you actually change the rules, people will start behaving differently.
The medium is the message, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why did you get into tech? We didn't really cover that.
So I became a TV journalist. I was working in local news. I worked my way up. I ended up at CNN in London and Beijing. I went to Beijing to cover the Olympics, and I stayed for 2 years in China. And I was covering, presidential visits and earthquakes and floods and North Korea. And I got an offer from Bloomberg to launch a tech show in San Francisco. And I thought, I use tech, but I'm not an expert on technology. And so they really took a chance on me. And the learning curve was very steep, and I read a ton of TechCrunch articles every day preparing myself. We really built the show from scratch, and I learned a lot. And it's interesting because at the beginning, I didn't know if I could do it, and now I have such a depth of knowledge across so many different topics because we do an hour show every day with 5, 6, 10 guests who are covering all different stories every day. And so it was kind of, that everyday education, but on, hyper speed.
Yeah.
I just had to learn fast.
Do you ever are they live shows?
Live
every
day.
Oh my God. That's so stressful.
2:00 Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Television. It's also streaming on the website.
Well, at least you don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. to do the morning news show.
It's a pretty, my schedule is very good, and especially for being a mom. I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
I've found a way to have, both a career in television, which, you can have insane hours, super early mornings or super late nights. But in business, we're following the markets. And so the markets close at a certain time, which is great if you're a parent.
And you've had your show for a really long time.
Yeah, it's been 8 years.
Cool.
It's been 8 years. It's been an incredible run.
Have you ever thought about starting a company?
What's been interesting about my show is I've been able to sort of reinvent the show and myself every few years. So we have the Daily Show, which has been there from the beginning. And then 3 years in, I thought, I want to have longer conversations. And I started doing an interview series called Bloomberg Studio 1.0, which I mentioned earlier, where I'd have long form conversations. And then sort of 3 years into that, I wrote a book. And so it's been a way to sort of keep challenging myself and keep things fresh. And Bloomberg has been super supportive of that. People have suggested starting a company, and I should probably be asking you for your advice. I mean, it sounds terrifying.
It's totally terrifying.
Each of these things has been my own little startup, and it's certainly crossed my mind. But of course, I'm like, I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah, you have to be a real glutton for punishment. You have to be comfortable delaying gratification and saying I'm going to take a big pay cut and work crazy hours to build this thing called enterprise value. That means hopefully my company will be worth something down the road where my stake in it is makes up for all the time that I spent getting paid less than I would otherwise.
And
right?
I am in awe of what you have done.
Thanks.
And what, I get to interview entrepreneurs every day. I'm so in awe, and especially female entrepreneurs, which I have a whole book about why, starting your own company as a woman is such a huge risk, and the odds are stacked against you. But there are success stories like you, like Katrina Lake at Stitch Fix, like Jen Hyman, who was my classmate at Harvard, who is the CEO of Rent the Runway. And, they've done such incredible things and are such great role models for people who do want to do this.
We have so much more with Emily Chang coming up, but first let's talk about Stitch Fix. So we all know Katrina Lake is a badass. I want to have her on this podcast. Emily has had the pleasure of interviewing her. And Stitch Fix, they've built a huge, incredible business on being able to predict what you're going to like. You show up, you fill out a style profile, and Stitch Fix will send you clothes, shoes, accessories picked out just for you. And if it didn't work, they wouldn't have IPO'd the company, and it wouldn't have been the largest female-led IPO in all of, I think it was 2017. Wow. So you can try things on. You're only charged for what you keep, and sending everything back is totally free and easy. And there's no subscription required. You can get your fix monthly, quarterly, or just whenever you feel like it, ad hoc. So get started now at stitchfix.com/girlboss, and you'll also get 25% off when you keep all 5 items in your box. That's stitchfix.com/girlboss to try Stitch Fix today. That's stitchfix.com/girlboss. We're going to continue with Emily in just a minute, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit about Skillshare.
Oh, man.
Skillshare is an online learning platform with over 18,000 classes in business, marketing, entrepreneurship, technology, and more. Basically, anything that you, if you're a listener, want to learn. I mean, they have 18,000 classes in business, marketing, entrepreneurship, technology, and you can learn pretty much anything you want. Social media strategy, Google Analytics. What do you want to learn, Maggie?
Honestly, I was just going to say I need to learn more about Excel. Google Excel. They have a class literally to become a master in those.
I want to be a master. I need to learn more about like finance stuff, like for business.
Me too.
I'm like, okay,
organizing
I'm
it
better, but
they have a class on how to bake the best onion poppy seed bagels.
Ooh, yum. Join the millions of students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for our listeners. Get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. That's right. Skillshare is offering Girlboss listeners 2 months of unlimited access to over 18,000 classes for just 99 cents. That's how confident they are that you're going to come back. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/girlboss. Again, go to Skillshare.com/girlboss to start your 2 months now. That's Skillshare.com/girlboss. Women make up just 7% of investors in Silicon Valley. I asked Emily to share how that affects female startup owners like me, and probably you. How does that small percentage of female investors determine how many women-led companies actually get off the ground?
As of when I wrote my book, women-led companies receive 2% of venture capital funding. So they're already super underrepresented among venture capital funded startups, like 5 or 6%. And then they only get 2% of the funding that is given out. And that is certainly not because women have 2% of good ideas. But I do think if you're a woman, there's never been a better time to start a company because there is so much public pressure on investors to fund women, which honestly, it's a good thing because it means more women will be funded and those women can prove everyone wrong about why they deserved it. And, I do see, I'm speaking to, women who oftentimes really want to do this or have been discouraged. And they, I believe, have more sort of courage than ever as a result of the cultural conversation that we're having. And I do think people like Katrina Lake, like Jennifer Hyman, are showing these investors that you're missing out if you're not funding women. And there needs to be some more time and more of a track record and more data to prove it. But I absolutely believe that if you fund women, if you fund a diversity of people, that's a competitive advantage.
What do you think about the Forbes cover? Like there was the Midas list, right? There's a bunch of women on the cover and they had this big fold out that was actually like a really goofy picture because some people were looking at the ground. And I don't know if you saw the like gatefold.
I have seen it.
I thought it was like not flattering. The cover was really nice. I was just looking at it on a plane back actually from Silicon Valley yesterday. And it's great. But the Midas list is still like
almost all men,
almost all dudes. So it's like a pat on the back or like a noogie, like good job, guys, in a way that's just still not, women are making larger strides and getting more visibility, and that will make room from the bottom. But the room at the top has to be made as well for them to enter that. And I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be.
Absolutely. I have interviewed so many of those women, and I know they've been working on this for a super long time, and I'm really impressed by their energy, enthusiasm, and commitment to this. And the nonprofit they started, All Raise, the goal is to get bigger checks to female founders and more diversity in venture capital firms. And, the industry isn't going to change on its own. So I do think it's going to take action like that and momentum like that to lead to real change. Now, some of these women like Kirsten Green and Aileen Lee, they're starting to have these big exits. Mm-hmm. And I think LPs are seeing that, and I hope LPs are seeing that. And if they don't, I believe they're going to miss the boat. But, you're right that it is going to take time. And I just think the movement that we've seen in the last year is so much better than what we've seen in the last 3 decades. Mm-hmm. So I applaud it.
Do you want to, just for our listener, describe what an LP is and why they would have influence in whether a woman joins a venture capital firm or not?
An LP, short for limited partner, these are the investors that fund venture capital firms, and they have lots and lots and lots of money. So we're talking about like the Harvard Endowment, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, family offices.
Sometimes oil.
Sometimes oil. I mean, the money comes from everywhere, and there's a lot of money, and it's looking for a place to go. And that money has traditionally funded Benchmark and Sequoia and firms that have historically had no women. And they both have one woman partner now, I should say. What was really interesting to me about the book is I found that women are better represented in the LP community than in the VC community. So you would think that they would, put their money towards, more diverse teams. But in fact, the way they say it is they care about diversity, but what they really care about is returns. And my opinion is they're not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you'll hear from LPs, they don't think they have the power in this situation because the firms can basically pick whoever they want to take their money. And everybody is looking, there's a lot of money, as I said, and all that money needs a place to go.
I mean, there's maybe 10 firms that have that power, and then the rest are like working for their LPs. Right?
My conclusion is that LPs aren't going to change this industry. The venture capital industry really needs to change on its own, which is why, seeing this activity among the female venture capitalists is so important. There's also Founders for Change, where founders are committing to consider the diversity of a firm when taking a check, to build diverse teams. Upfront Ventures, which is an LA-based venture capital firm, is basically doing something similar to the inclusion rider that Frances McDormand talked about at the Oscars, saying, okay, we'll give you a term sheet, we'll give you money if you promise to build a diverse team. And one of the Upfront entrepreneurs came up to me at a talk and said, so I work with Upfront, and we have 6 people, 2 women, 2 people of color. So actually what they told us worked. And so those things are really heartening. It is baby steps, but the steps are bigger than they've ever been. So I'm hopeful.
We have 20 women and 1 dude, and I've never worked with a better team. So.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks. He's an awesome dude, and we hope to have more dudes.
By the way, Girlboss is a whole operation. I'm so impressed. There are so many people working here, and that's really a testament to you.
We're busy. We're running fast, and it's such an important time. It's the right time to be doing this, and especially, not just in what's happening with women, but what's happening with these platforms, and with publishers. Everybody's lost, so it's the right time to show up and be stand in the corner with our arms crossed and be like, what's going on here and what can we build around that?
Right, and exploit it.
Yeah,
the world is your oyster right now.
I talked to a lot of investors when we raised our seed round, and a few of them have had some very public sexual harassment issues. And I didn't know that when I was having those conversations with them. And part of me says, if you touch money, you touch something fucked up, right? Somewhere in the chain. Do you believe that? Is all money, dirty at some point?
All
that's
money
a really
is not created equal.
That's a really big question.
Is what I would say.
Yeah.
And you're right. There have been a lot of egregious examples of bad behavior. A lot of people exposed in Silicon Valley specifically, and a lot of them happen to be venture capitalists who have a lot of power in situations with, and often find themselves alone in a room with a woman entrepreneur who has no money and needs money. And so I do think the behavior of venture capitalists in particular has been quite shocking. That said, there's been some incredibly brave women who have come forward, some incredible journalism to expose these people. It's not the only problem. I do think the bigger problem is systemic discrimination and the way investors perceive male and female entrepreneurs differently, which is a much bigger conversation. But I do think getting some of these bad actors out of the system is snapping some people into line, and nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history. And there's been far too much enabling of this bad behavior. And I think at this point, that kind of stuff is not going to be tolerated.
Mm-mm. And there has to be examples made. It all seems very harsh, but I think that's how precedents are set, and people have to see those examples to be even if change happens out of an oh shit moment, it's better than no change. And
we'll see what happens. Some of these people are already trying to raise new funds or start new companies, and it's been 6 months.
They still get all the carrier returns on their investments. They're not getting shut out of the companies. They're just not present.
In some cases, yes. And so, the economics are always very opaque in venture capital, which is part of the problem. But, I do hope that women entrepreneurs feel more empowered than they did maybe a year ago. This kind of behavior is not acceptable.
Yeah. Now's the time, guys.
Also, as I said, all money is created equal. You have a choice. Don't take that person's money.
Yeah.
You don't need it. You can find it elsewhere.
So I went to dinner recently with a recently divorced, but didn't know when I agreed to do this, CEO of one of the largest retailers in the world, who was like, I'm in town with my brother, want to get dinner? And I was like, oh, whatever. I guess you're traveling with your brother, but like, sure, let's get dinner. And when we've gotten dinner before, it's been like, oh, cool. Tell me about how you raised money. Or like, whoa, how'd you sell your company? Like just getting advice from someone who's like done it multiple times. And I showed up and it was like, we sat down, and it's weird enough going to dinner with two dudes when you're a woman. It's just, that's weird. But I'm like, I can really like hold myself, and I don't like really need anything. I'm in a different kind of position of privilege with what I've done in the last 10 years, whatever. And one of the first questions out of his mouth was, are you still dating that guy? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, did I tell you I'm getting divorced? I'm going through a divorce. And I was like, no. And then his brother's like, I'm getting divorced too. And I was like, oh. And then I was like, I understand why they invited me to dinner. And they were like on this bender in LA, just like hanging out and having fun because they're two like recently divorced like bros.
Literally.
And bros. And I mean, still so nice, and nothing like super inappropriate happened, but I just left feeling like I know this person because of my merit, and I left that dinner feeling like a lamb led to slaughter or something. And it was just like a really weird feeling. I felt like I had like cheated on my boyfriend or something, but had like absolutely no interest in
right. You feel violated even though you did absolutely nothing wrong.
I did. And usually people are terrified of me enough. I run a company called Girlboss. Like I usually have a much more severe haircut, but you have to be like pretty dense to like pull anything with. I don't know.
They just got called out on the Girlboss podcast.
I don't know if they're listening.
Hopefully they're listening.
If you're listening, I still like you, but I want to stick to business. Do you feel like, okay, non sequitur, do you feel like women have to have an education like yours or Jen Hyman's to build a big company?
No, because you don't. And, we all come from different perspectives, which it's kind of the point of this book, right? We all live different experiences. Not all women are the same. Not all Black people are the same. Not all, we all come to the table with a different life experience that is valuable no matter what you're doing. And your point of view is something that is so unique to you. And look at what you've created. We certainly need more examples of people like you and Katrina Lake and Jen Hyman. And there just aren't enough women to look up to. But I know that they're out there. And, there is, I think, some amount of leaning in that has to be done. But also, the system needs to change. The system needs to change to allow women to reach their full potential.
Emily's interviewed pretty much every tech founder, CEO, entrepreneur, and is super attuned to what's happening. So I asked her what her thoughts were on Facebook's recent crisis and what she thinks Facebook's future and the future of these platforms will be.
Facebook is in the middle of a reckoning. I was actually in Washington, D.C., inside the Zuckerberg hearing, and It was a fascinating experience. I think he actually did a pretty good job answering the questions, but there is so much left on the table. And part of the problem is the lawmakers didn't really understand what they're asking about.
Yeah, I heard it was like watching your grandpa ask you like how to use your like drone or something.
The Senate hearings on the first day were very disappointing. The House hearings on the second day were better, but they really missed an opportunity to ask him some tougher questions. And I don't think that necessarily, Mark Zuckerberg came into this with any bad intentions, but I do think they need to be more honest about what they're really doing. What are they collecting about me? How are they using it? Who are they selling that to? How many Cambridge Analyticas are there out there? How many companies could have possibly misused or exploited my information? Part of the problem is these companies say that they're changing the world and making the world a better place, but they are money-making engines. They make billions and billions of dollars a year. Like, this is a business. This is not about doing good. Mm-hmm. So, I think it'll be really interesting to see how many users actually take a pause on Facebook, but they're already so big. I don't expect to see a huge change. I do hope that both Facebook and Twitter and YouTube can get a better handle on online hate. I think it is such a huge, huge problem. The internet has become a hostile and scary and unfriendly place, especially if you're a woman. The whole 8th chapter of my book is about online harassment and trolling. And in the end, I think it's going to hurt their business if they can't make it better.
Mm-hmm. I think the strange thing about the Cambridge Analytica thing is that everyone's like, what? You're selling my information? Just because like that sale of information got Trump elected doesn't mean it's like one example of like God knows how many that like you probably agreed to by like making an account.
Right.
And what does that mean like for our future if so many people are kind of blindly agreeing to things that we don't even understand?
It means the platforms have a bigger responsibility that they have not been living up to. And maybe we need regulation. Maybe we need better laws to protect consumers who, let's be honest, nobody reads the terms of service. And the terms of service are confusing. So that's obviously not working. And users feel that their trust has been breached. So, maybe we need better privacy laws. Maybe we need to have what they have in Europe, which are much stricter in Europe. But that's not to say that bad actors won't be maliciously trying to break into these platforms. That's going to happen over and over again, which is why they're investing in security. But, they need to have been doing that yesterday and not now.
So bad actor isn't like a D-list celebrity. Like tell me what a bad actor is.
A bad actor is a hacker, maybe a nation state that's trying to exploit the platform or trying to steal information or sell your information on the dark web.
Yeah. I found out that only like 5% of the information on the web is indexed by Google.
Really? Well,
yeah.
A lot of the web is dark.
It's
a
all dark
place out there. That's a fascinating statistic.
Look that up. It's crazy. My boyfriend does like all this research and is like a dystopian like nerd. What's this GDPR thing? I kind of understand it.
So GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, is a law that they've put in place in Europe to protect your information. And it basically gives the user much more control over how their information is used. And Mark Zuckerberg has said that he actually believes in principle that it's good no matter where you live. So Facebook will be essentially implementing it for users around the world. It's not a law in the United States yet, but it potentially could be. There already have been new privacy laws introduced as a result of the hearings.
And what does that mean for people and what does it mean for brands?
For people, it means generally they're going to have more control. Things might not necessarily change about the user experience, but what happens on the back ends. It'll be really interesting to see what it means for advertisers because Facebook's whole business model is based on leveraging the data that you share with Facebook. They don't actually sell the information. They are, quick to say, but they essentially rent your information to advertisers so they can target you personally. And that's why Facebook's platform has been so valuable and powerful for advertisers. So it'll be interesting to see whether advertisers can still reach the audience they want to reach if Facebook tightens up, some of the data that they use or starts taking less data. And it'll be interesting to see if advertisers leave Facebook. But again, they have 2 billion people. It's hard to find an audience of that size anywhere else.
Well, we're building one at Girlboss. So if anybody wants to advertise in a safe place with us and you're listening.
Podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Advertise on.
Mm-hmm. We do custom shows, custom episodes. What do you think is like the biggest thing that people can do to create more diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
So first of all, do it. Start your company. If you have an idea, do it. That said, change really needs to come from the top. And so I think CEOs and top investors need to make this a priority. And it can't be like the 15th thing on the list. It needs to be 1, 2, or 3. And if you're building a company, start early. Start on day 1. When you're looking for people to join your company, look for people who believe in your mission, but don't look like you. Because they will come to the table with a different life experience, and you don't want to have that blind spot. You don't want to surround yourself with only men or only women or only people of a certain kind and miss something because you don't have somebody who looks different or is different or thinks different sitting at the table. I mean, the last chapter of the book is packed with very, very prescriptive things. But I do think the main things are, this needs to come from leadership, and it needs to start like yesterday. It's never too early to start this. And generally when you're hiring and you're recruiting people, the research shows that if you just focus on raising awareness or unconscious bias training, you won't necessarily have a lot of impact. But if you give people the tools to combat their bias, that can have a lot of impact. It's really hard to say, just change the way you think about women. But what you can say is we're not even going to start an interview process until we have at least 2 qualified female candidates or candidates of color. And that might take a little longer, but it will pay off in the end. Maybe it takes 3 weeks to find the first white dude for the job. Maybe it takes 3 months to hire a woman, but in 3 years, you'll be so happy you did because you'll actually be able to move faster because you won't have to go outside on the street and do user research. And, there are a lot of people in the book who, it's not all bad news. There are people in the book who are trying hard, people who've been willing to admit their mistakes. Dick Costolo, since you mentioned Dick Costolo, when he started his company after Twitter, he said, I'm not going to hire another man until I hire a woman every time. And so he kept building the business 50-50. And he said we could actually move faster because when we were making a decision about a product, we didn't have to say, oh, let's go interview some women about what they think
My wife likes this.
Yeah, exactly. They said, oh, let's just ask the people in the room, what do you guys think? What do you guys and gals think? And so, there are lots of things people can do, which is why you have to read the book. And I really am hopeful that in 5 years or 10 years, we'll be sitting here having a different conversation. And a woman entrepreneur will be just normal. And a woman CEO will be normal. A woman president
Girl boss won't have a reason to be.
A girl boss will be normal.
Yeah.
But you'll still have a huge business.
Yes. I heard you correct yourself when you said guys. And on a recent episode of Silicon Valley, one of them refers to people as guys and said, oh, that's a microaggression. Do you watch Silicon Valley? And did you correct yourself because of that?
So I've actually had a few cameos on Silicon Valley.
Cool.
They come to our set and we do some interviews. I think I corrected myself because I know that's the politically correct thing to do. I think we all need to lighten up a little bit. I think being offended by someone saying, hey guys, is kind of taking it a little too far. I'm glad you're nodding because look, I don't get offended
we have
if
work
someone
to
says,
do.
Yeah,
Right?
guys, to me. We know what people mean.
Do you watch it?
I do watch it. I love it.
I do too. A lot of people in the Bay Area are like, I can't watch it. It's too close to home. Oh my God.
It is so close to home, which is why it's good. And sometimes in Silicon Valley, I think fact is even funnier than fiction.
Before Emily left, I asked her to share her most recent girl boss moment.
I have 3 sons, so I feel like I have a girl boss moment every day, which is fun. But honestly, publishing the book has been my most recent girl boss moment. I didn't think I could do this. I had no idea the moment that it would be published in. I mean, I had no idea Trump would be elected or that Me Too would be happening. It could have been like a tree falling in a forest. And now that I've done it, I've had all of these invitations to speak at like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and YouTube and places where, my book is called Brotopia. They could have said, no, thank you. We don't need your book here. But they want to have these conversations. And that's encouraging and meaningful. And, all I can ask is that the book starts a meaningful conversation about what we can do to change. And I think it's doing that.
What does success mean to you?
To me, success is about having an impact. And, the most tragic thing would have been if this had zero impact. And, time will tell, right? My biggest fear is that this is just a moment and not a movement. But I think it really is having an impact. And to me, that's success. And so if I do an interview or I tell a story or I, do something on the show that, impacts someone, that's success.
Mm-hmm.
That's success.
Yeah. I think that change is made. I mean, it's made in different ways, but at arm's length is like how the best things are changed and just affecting one person or inspiring one person or them getting a piece of information that lets them improve their life, right?
Absolutely. And, I feel like I'm sort of putting this out in the world. There's so much we don't understand about how and why we got here. Now we do. Now we know it's a problem. No one can say they didn't know. Ignorance at this point can only be willful. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we can do.
Well, thank you, Emily Chang, author of Brotopia, host of Bloomberg Technology. You can buy her book anywhere books are found. Thank you so much for joining me on Girlboss Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this was fun.
It's been
I
awesome
learned a lot.
to be here. Me too.
Thank you guys for joining us again on Girlboss Radio today. Subscribe anywhere podcasts are found. Leave us a rating in Apple Podcasts and share this podcast with your friends. And don't forget to check out Self-Service, our self-care podcast that drops on Sundays. That's 20 minutes of a relief and a little bit of preparation for the week ahead. And also #Lip Stories that we're doing in partnership with Sephora Collection, which has guests like Sophia Amoruso, who does the fashion line LPA, Aminatu So, who's also been on this podcast, Jen Rubio, the founder of Away Luggage, just an amazing group of women all telling their own unique stories. That's it, guys. See you next week.